In 1954, France built a fortress in a remote Vietnamese valley and expected its enemy to attack. The French had artillery, aircraft, fortified positions, and experienced troops. On paper, the balance looked brutally simple, yet less than 2 months later, the entire stronghold had collapsed. Thousands of French soldiers were prisoners. The battlefield had become a maze of Vietnamese trenches, and a colonial war that seemed capable of dragging on for years suddenly moved toward its political end. The real question is not simply how Dien Bien Phu fell. It is how an isolated valley became the place where military assumptions, logistics, and empire collided. The story began in northwestern Vietnam, near the border with Laos. Dien Bien Phu was a broad valley surrounded by steep mountains. French commanders believed that geography could work in their favor. In late 1953, they established a fortified airland base there. The position was divided into multiple defensive strongpoints. Some were given female names, such as Beatrice, Gabrielle, and Isabelle. At the center stood the headquarters of General Christian de Castries. The French strategy had a clear logic. They wanted to draw the Viet Minh into a major conventional battle. French firepower could then destroy attacking forces in open terrain. Aircraft would supply the garrison. Artillery would dominate the valley. Defensive positions would support each other. It was a powerful plan, but it depended on one enormous assumption. The surrounding mountains had to remain effectively unusable to the enemy. That assumption did not survive contact with Vietnamese logistics. Under General Vo Nguyen Giap, the Viet Minh moved tens of thousands of troops into the region. But soldiers were only part of the problem. Artillery, ammunition, food, medical supplies, and engineering equipment had to cross difficult terrain. Roads were limited. Vehicles could not solve everything. Much of the burden fell on human labor, bicycles reinforced to carry heavy loads, and supply networks stretching across the countryside. Then came one of the defining images of the battle. Artillery pieces were hauled through jungle and up mountain slopes surrounding the valley. This was not a cinematic shortcut. It was exhausting, dangerous work. Guns were positioned in concealed firing sites, often protected by the terrain. From these heights, Viet Minh artillery could strike French positions below. Suddenly, the valley looked different. The French were no longer simply sitting inside a fortress. They were sitting at the bottom of a bowl. The battle began on March 13, 1954. Viet Minh artillery opened fire. The strongpoint known as Beatrice was attacked and overrun. Soon afterward, Gabrielle also fell. The outer defenses were being stripped away. French artillery responded, but locating and destroying well-concealed enemy guns proved extremely difficult. Air supply continued, yet the airfield came under increasing fire. Landing aircraft became dangerous. Eventually, parachute drops became the main lifeline. And even those were imperfect. Some supplies landed outside French lines. The fortress was being supplied from the sky, while the ground around it was shrinking. This is where the battle changed character. Giap did not simply order endless frontal attacks. After costly early fighting, Viet Minh forces increasingly relied on a systematic siege. Trenches were extended toward French positions. New lines appeared night after night. Communication routes and firing positions followed. The image is almost difficult to appreciate today. A fortified camp designed to dominate open ground was slowly being approached through the ground itself. The trenches crept closer. French soldiers could see the battlefield becoming smaller. The Viet Minh could move men and ammunition under greater protection. They could isolate defensive positions one by one. The French could still fight fiercely, but their freedom of movement was steadily disappearing. This was no longer a battle of one dramatic charge. It became a battle of meters. A trench advanced. A position fell. A supply route narrowed. Another artillery barrage arrived. Then the process repeated. Weeks passed. The French garrison suffered mounting casualties. Medical facilities became overwhelmed. Reinforcements still parachuted into the valley, sometimes entering a battlefield from which there was almost no realistic exit. Outside Dien Bien Phu, the political stakes were growing. France had been fighting in Indochina since 1946. The war was expensive and increasingly unpopular at home. Dien Bien Phu was supposed to strengthen the French military position before negotiations. Instead, the fortress was becoming a symbol of vulnerability. By late April, The Viet Minh trench system had tightened dramatically. Several French defensive sectors were isolated or under severe pressure. The battlefield was turning into a compressed pocket of mud, shell craters, damaged bunkers, and exhausted troops. Then came the final phase. In early May, Viet Minh forces intensified their attacks. French positions continued to fall. Ammunition was running low in some areas. Defensive lines fragmented. On May 7, 1954, the central French position was overwhelmed. Viet Minh troops entered the command sector. General de Castries was captured. By the end of the day, organized resistance in the main position had collapsed. The southern position at Isabelle was also defeated shortly afterward. The battle had lasted 56 days. Its human cost was severe on both sides. Thousands were killed or wounded. Large numbers of French Union troops became prisoners. Many prisoners later endured extremely harsh conditions during captivity and forced marches. So the victory should not be remembered as a clean symbol on a map. It was achieved through immense suffering. But militarily, the result was unmistakable. A major French fortified position had been destroyed. And politically, the timing was explosive. While fighting was still underway, diplomats were gathering in Geneva to discuss conflicts in Asia. The collapse at Dien Bien Phu transformed the atmosphere surrounding negotiations. The battle did not single-handedly create every political decision that followed. History is rarely that simple. But it dramatically weakened France's bargaining position and reinforced the reality that continuing the war would be extremely costly. In July 1954, the Geneva Agreements brought an end to major hostilities in the First Indochina War. Vietnam was temporarily divided near the 17th parallel, with forces regrouping on opposite sides, while political questions remained unresolved. That settlement did not bring lasting peace. The division of Vietnam became part of a larger confrontation that would eventually produce another, even more destructive war. And that is what makes Dien Bien Phu larger than the battlefield itself. The surviving photographs tell the story in fragments. You can see trenches cutting through the earth. You can see artillery hidden in mountainous terrain. You can see French prisoners after the surrender. You can see the headquarters associated with de Castries. You can study maps showing strong points that once looked formidable. Then you can read the diplomatic documents from Geneva. Place those images together, and the scale of the transformation becomes clear. A valley became a siege. A siege became a defeat. A defeat changed negotiations. And negotiations reshaped the political map of Southeast Asia. Dien Bien Phu was not proof that technology or firepower were meaningless. They mattered enormously. It showed something more uncomfortable. Firepower cannot compensate forever for flawed assumptions, vulnerable supply lines, difficult geography, and an enemy capable of adapting faster than expected. The French built a fortress designed to force the Viet Minh into the kind of battle France believed it could win. The Viet Minh changed the kind of battle being fought. That difference decided the valley. On May 7, 1954, the guns did more than fall silent around Dien Bien Phu. They announced that the colonial order in Asia was changing, and that one battle in a distant mountain valley could carry consequences far beyond anyone standing inside it.